Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In the following collection, we again dive headfirst into more accounts where the Ouija board takes centre stage, tying together three gripping real-life tales of terror. In each story, we bear witness to how the quiet lives of everyday people can be abruptly uprooted by unseen supernatural forces. These tales serve as stark reminders of the potential catastrophic fallout that can occur when one meddles with the mysterious and unnerving realm of the Ouija board. A father's warning. Ever since her youth, Helen had a fascination with this spiritual realm. Her curiosity was sparked when her father passed away when she was just a young girl. "I had a dream that my father wouldn't be there to celebrate Christmas with us," she revealed. A few months later, he was diagnosed with cancer and not long after passed away. 2 decades later, Helen, now a mother of two, found herself at a spiritualist gathering, her interest in the metaphysical remaining unabated. Nestled at the back of a crowded auditorium, she observed as a woman stepped onto the stage and surveyed the audience. Suddenly, the woman's gaze met Helen's, and she broke into an impassioned rendition of Jim Reeves' iconic song, "Welcome to My World." Helen almost spilled a cup of tea in complete startlement. This was her father's most beloved song. The psychic then stopped singing and relayed a message from Helen's father. She must avoid using a Ouija board. He asserted it will bring no good. Helen was left stunned. She had been considering trying out a Ouija board, but had confided in no one about doing so. Despite her father's spectral warning, Helen found herself unable to shake off the idea of the Ouija board. During a casual evening of drinks at a neighbour's house, the conversation veered into the topic of the supernatural. The neighbours, Rob and Judy Johnson, were aficionados of the Ouija board and persuaded Helen to give it a try. With her consent, the Johnsons prepared a homemade alphabet board, with an inverted whiskey glass serving as a planchette. They positioned themselves around the board, cross-legged, with candles casting shadows around the room. The session commenced with the trio resting their fingertips lightly on the glass. Helen felt the glass twitch in various directions, but she was uncertain of the source of the force behind its movements. The first question was raised by Rob. "Who do you wish to communicate with?" The glass slid over the letters H-E-L-E-N. There was a pause, then the glass resumed its movements, spelling out the obscene phrase, "Die, B-word." Helen was taken aback and accused Rob of making a distasteful joke, but Rob vehemently denied manipulating the glass. Shivering with fear yet intrigued, Helen cautiously inquired, "Who are you?" The glass began to move swiftly, spelling out, "I was murdered just like you." Helen repeated, "Who are you?" This time the response was S-A-T-A-N. Helen yelled defiantly, "I'm not scared, to hell with you." Instantly the whiskey glass soared off the table and shattered against the wall. Judy jumped and flicked on the lights. The three of them stood in silence, trying to regain their composure, until Rob finally declared, "We should never do this again." Despite the terror she'd experienced at the Johnsons, Helen was compelled to uncover more about the message that had been sent to her. She pleaded with Rob and Judy to attempt another contact with the spirit. Though they eventually conceded, they were unable to call forth the entity again. Roughly a month later, Helen awoke from a horrifying dream, in which she was being assaulted by a man wielding a hammer. She instantly realised that her toying with the Ouija board had crossed the line and pledged never to engage with it again. Although committed to her decision, Helen continually felt a sense of unease whenever she ventured outside, leading her to increasingly isolate herself at home. She couldn't shake off a feeling of constantly being watched or even being pursued. One afternoon, however, she mustered up her courage and stepped out of her apartment to visit her son, who resided a few blocks away. As she walked past the stairwell, a voice snarled from behind, "Die, B-word." Quaking with fear, Helen spun around to see a man in a dark shirt step out from under the stairwell, brandishing a hammer. She let out a scream as the hammer struck her head once, then twice, By some miracle, Helen was able to stumble past him back towards her apartment, but before she could unlock the door, she fell to the ground in a pool of blood. Helen's next memory was of regaining consciousness in a hospital, with a doctor informing her that she had a fractured skull. Her shrieks had attracted the attention of a passerby, who had promptly called an ambulance, likely saving her life. However, her assailant had vanished without a trace. 7 years on, Helen continues to live with the persistent dread that her attacker might return any day to complete what he'd started. Naturally, her deepest regret is ignoring her father's caution about the Ouija board, and if only she had heeded his advice. It's not your friend. Roommates Josh and Derek found themselves experimenting with a Ouija board one night after returning from a party in a state of inebriation. By around 4 a.m, they'd managed to establish communication with an entity named James, who revealed that he'd succumbed to cancer. This revelation sobered Josh slightly, as he had recently lost a friend named James to the same disease. They attempted to probe further but failed to connect with the spirit again. Nevertheless, this surprising encounter piqued their curiosity, and they started using the Ouija board daily. Before long, they began to frequently interact with the spirit named Chad during their sessions. From the outset, Chad seemed likeable, where they often engaged in light-hearted banter about their girlfriends, their looks, and other everyday topics. One evening, Chad spelled out the word C-A-R-E-F-U-L, careful. When questioned by Josh about its meaning, the board responded with P-O-L-I-C-E, police. But an hour later, the police showed up at their apartment to discuss an issue with Josh, which was resolved later that night. Grateful to Chad for the warning about the police and keen to introduce his younger brother, Kevin, to the seemingly benevolent spirit, Josh organised another Ouija board session the following night, this time inviting Kevin to join them. After several failed attempts to reach out to Chad, Kevin grew restless and removed his fingers from the planchette. Immediately, the planchette began to move. Josh queried the board if Kevin's presence was inhibiting their communication that evening. The board confirmed with a Y-E-S, yes. As a result, Derek took Kevin's place at the table, while Kevin took up the task of documenting the session with a notebook and pen. The session resumed as usual, with Josh expressing gratitude to Chad for the previous night's tip and continuing their typical friendly conversation. However, soon Josh sensed the atmosphere start to shift. The planchette kept oscillating between the letters M and A on the board. When the men asked it to stop, it started counting down from 10. Once again, they demanded it cease, and it spelled out S-O-S-C-A-R-E-D. So scared in response. Feeling slightly apprehensive but still curious, Josh and Derek inquired who was frightened. The planchette again darted between the M and A before resuming its countdown from 10. When the men commanded it to stop, it spelled out a rude retort F-word to you and hurled a derogatory term at Josh. Fed up, the men requested the spirit to conclude the session, only to receive N-O. They reiterated their demand more sternly and felt a wave of relief when the planchette finally drifted to goodbye. Drained and rattled, the men decided to end the night. Josh, however, felt uneasy about staying in the apartment and chose to accompany Kevin home, where he took refuge in the guest room. That night, Josh was tormented by ghastly nightmares. He dreamed of faces shrieking in horror, their eyes bleeding profusely. He also witnessed a woman slashing her wrists and then cutting her own throat. He woke up drenched in sweat and managed to get only broken sleep for the rest of the night. When Josh returned to his own apartment the following morning, he was taken aback by Derek's absence, considering the early hour. Derek reappeared around midday, explaining that the previous night, as he had attempted to sleep, he had felt an alien presence in the room. Despite his best efforts to dismiss it, the sensation only intensified until it felt as if an invisible crowd was encircling his bed, observing him. Unable to bear it any longer, he left for his parents' home. However, peaceful sleep eluded him there as well, as he perceived a shadowy figure standing in the bathroom, watching him. In that moment, the roommates resolved to sever all ties with the Ouija board. They shattered it into 7 parts and disposed of it in a dumpster. Subsequently, they invited a clergyman, a family friend of Derek's, to bless the apartment. While these measures brought them some comfort, Josh and Derek continued to question if their actions were too little, too late. Never say, prove yourself. At the age of 15, Tara, along with a friend, decided to experiment with a Ouija board one evening, driven by a mix of boredom and curiosity. As they didn't possess a proper board, they crafted one out of cardboard and utilised a small glass as a planchette. Once Tara's mother had retired to bed, the girls lit candles in Tara's room and arranged them in a broad circle. They positioned themselves within this circle with the makeshift Ouija board and began posing questions to it. At the outset, the sessions were relatively uneventful. The girls engaged in light-hearted banter and received innocuous responses to their questions. However, the atmosphere took a dramatic turn when Kara challenged the board to demonstrate its authenticity. Instantly, all 10 candles encircling the girls were snuffed out. Startled, Tara leapt up and switched on the lights. They quickly stashed away the board and spent the rest of the night attempting to comfort each other with jokes, eventually falling asleep with the lights still on. Unfortunately, the extinguishing of the candles marked the onset of a series of eerie incidents for Tara. A few days later, her stereo blared to life of its own accord, at full volume, in the early hours of the morning. The following afternoon, while Tara and her mother were seated at the kitchen table, one of the teacups, hanging on a hook, began to sway. They observed in bewilderment as one by one all the teacups started swinging frantically. Just as it seemed the cups would hurtle off their hooks, they came to an abrupt halt. Then came the infestation of spiders. In the weeks following the Ouija board session, spiders appeared to invade every nook and cranny of Tara's house. One night as Tara prepared for bed, she unveiled her covers to find 2 spiders scuttling over her sheets. 2 days later, she felt a strange sensation in a towel after stepping out of the shower, only to discover yet another spider. The visible occurrences were unsettling enough, but it was the invisible and inexplicable phenomena that Tara found truly unforgettable. She was haunted by the sound of muffled voices emanating from outside a bedroom door, and sometimes from within her closet, every night. It wasn't until her family relocated to a new home that Tara finally felt liberated from whatever entity had been proving its existence to her since that eventful night with the Ouija board.